In August 1998, after joining Young and Rubicam, I was introduced to my colleague NDB on the U.S. Army advertising business. For 4 years, Nancy and I shared an office wall and immediately bonded over shared lifetime experiences. Both the oldest and the most misunderstood member of an Irish Catholic family, sometimes even 20 years later, her posts on Facebook, I believe, are a wink to me and our shared experiences. Nancy was the mentor and friend I needed, and I believe the timing was right for her too. Even though Nancy was from the New York tri-state area, she always had a bit of a twang to her voice and an easygoing cadence. Nothing seemed to rattle Nancy at work. She taught us all in the Army group how to empathize with the soldiers in the field, given her role as the field media supervisor. Everyone should have a friend who you can laugh together with until you're both crying. Nancy was that friend for me. We partnered on a few adventures. Once we went to see our Army ad shown on screens in movie theaters on Long Island, and we once went to the Inn at Gurney's in West Hampton for a girls' weekend. Later on, I hired recruiter Nancy a couple of times. She helped me so much this past year when I began to follow her footsteps into the executive recruiting business. Nancy was always a giving and authentic human, a real trooper and a hero to us all, and a true best friend to me. I shall miss you, Nancy. You've always been there for me. I can't wait to laugh and cry with you again.
I first met Nancy through my dad. He used to give her piano lessons back in the Poconos when she lived there. And we used to go to her house when I was a kid and play with the dogs, with Sly and Ruff. It was always a great time. And then she was the main reason I moved out to Pittsburgh and went to school at Duquesne. There are so many stories to think of, but the one that sticks out is her taking me to go see Chick Corea, which in itself is such an amazing gift to give. And what I didn't know is when we went there, we were also going to meet him. And after the show, she took me to the back room of the MCG, and we got to meet and speak with Chick Corea, which is a memory that will live on in my life with her, always. 3 words that I would use to describe Nancy would probably be generous, hardworking, and devoted. What makes Nancy special in my eyes would be how she's able to take her ideas or any idea and realize them in reality, and her genuine appreciation for people and art and how she's able to show that appreciation.
Nancy and I met on the first day of classes at Carnegie Mellon 45 years ago, and we've been best friends ever since. We went to school together. We've worked together. We even lived together for a time. We've shared so many interesting, serious, sad, fun, silly, ridiculous, absurd moments together. I think my favorite moments are the silly ones, mostly instigated by Nancy, from recreating a David Letterman stupid human trick in my kitchen to taking a curling lesson, which honestly happened at an age when we should have known better. But Nancy is ever the instigator, and I am ever the willing participant. If Nancy was a painting, she'd be an abstract canvas, painted with big, bold brushstrokes in deep jewel tones. Nancy likes to put things inside of other things. Nancy is tenacious. If she had a motto, it would be, where there is a will, there's a way. Nancy loves to cook for her friends. It is truly a gift. Nancy and I have always agreed that if only she and I could merge into one person, we would be fantastic. I'm tall, she's short. Nancy is curvy. I am not. She's spontaneous. I'm deliberate. She's tenacious, and I let things go. She's big picture. I'm detail-oriented. I'm reserved. She's dramatic. Nancy forges ahead. I need a plan. I'm water. She's fire. Yin and yang. Perfect together. Maybe that's why we've been best friends for all this time. Love you, Nance.
Nancy and I met 21 years ago in 1999 when I was new to both recruiting and the advertising world, having just been hired at Darcy Advertising in Troy, Michigan, which later became the Detroit office of Leo Burnett. From her Pennsylvania base, Nancy was helping me identify candidates to fill account roles all over North America to work on our then Pontiac and Cadillac brand business. Nancy was the gold standard for research. The agencies, their work, their players. She spent a great deal of her time getting to know her candidates so she could help them reach their career goals and simultaneously make good matches for her agency clients. She was not only a superstar recruiter, but a mover and a shaker herself, having worked in the hot seat of New York advertising for some time. She really knew how to sell, whether it was her business, her candidates. She was so well researched and so prepared you couldn't help but take each submitted candidate seriously. I was the new kid. She had the tenure. I truly respected and trusted her advertising prowess. You know, I never told her this. At first, I was really intimidated by Nancy. She was a strong, educated, experienced agency and recruitment powerhouse. She knew all the players, what they were known for, who was director here, who was CEO there, and all the fun gossip, too. I was green, and she was going to teach me a thing or two, for sure. I made sure to listen well, and she shared experience and stories that would forever impact how I treated my own candidates. My goal was to be as smart and as successful a recruiter as Nancy. Our relationship grew from professional associates to friends, which would include exchanging cards, gifts, letters, and lots of laughs, especially at the craziness that is the ad agency life. We shared our loves, which were our dogs, cats, the piano, travel, our losses. She kept tabs on my music lessons, and I kept tabs on Sly, her beloved canine buddy. We kept each other updated on the who's who and what's what in the fast-moving agency scene. We commiserated on the frustrations that abound in that space as well. 3 words I'd use to describe Nancy: assertive and intelligent. Really, that's 2 words, but she was well-read, educated, savvy, cultured. She loved to travel, adventurous. She would try anything that looked fun. So the interesting thing about my 20-plus years with Nance is that we've never been in the same state. We've always lived hundreds of miles from one another. That said, she's been one of my closest confidants all these years. It hasn't stopped us from picking up the phone, picking up right where we left off last. She's been a mentor, an advocate, and friend to me. I don't have that many people in my life I can say that about. I feel like I got the golden ticket when I met Nancy Dolan-Brady, and you just can't replace that.
My name is Peter Stumpf, and I met Nancy through our mutual love for the piano. I'm a piano technician, and she was a piano owner, and we had several mutual friends that were piano teachers and performers. So that's really kind of how we came to know each other. As music brings people together, it often gives them an opportunity to build friendships. And I began to like Nancy because she was smart. She was a good critical thinker. She knew how to use her brain in addition to using her brawn. She was a very good person to be around. You come away from it just feeling enlightened. It's articulate conversation. It is something that helps you to re-examine a lot of things, and it makes you think, and it makes you feel alive. Nancy is absolutely awesome. The words I would use to describe her: she's generous. She has opened her home many times. I was just new in her life, and my whole family was over. She shared food, and she had her dog and fireworks from the city. It was an amazing evening. I think she is very insightful. I think she's very helpful to people. She's certainly helped build some careers. Nancy, I love you. You're awesome. As I'm making this message, I'm looking forward to when I get to speak with you again. What a blessing that will be.
I first met Nancy in 1987 when I was a VP account supervisor at the ad agency Y&R. We had just won the U.S. Army recruiting advertising contract, and we proceeded to expand upon the successful Be All You Can Be campaign.
You're reaching deep inside you, for things you've never known. It's been tough, rough going, but you haven't gone alone.
We do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day.
Be all that you can
Hey,
be.
First Sergeant. Good morning.
Find your future in the army.
Nancy had worked at the previous agency, NW Air. I think she was the primary staff person placed at the Pittsburgh Recruiting Battalion, and she came highly recommended by the Army client. Y&R brought Nancy on board to hire and manage the staff responsible for the recruiting brigades. Because I was the account person responsible for overseeing the creation of national and local advertising, I worked closely with Nancy. Now, you're familiar with the term herding cats. Well, that describes Nancy's job in charge of the field force. She did it very well. Over the years, we became dear friends, and she and my wife, Mary, became friendly too. When Nancy became an executive recruiter, she had the lead for a job at a small ad agency when Mary was between jobs. Mary was hired, and that job later turned into a bigger job where she worked until she retired. When Nancy was looking to grow her recruiting and consulting business around 10 or so years ago, I chatted with my clever friend Aaron, and he came up with her moniker as the Fairy Job Mother, and that's the origin of that term. One time, Nancy visited us at our apartment in Manhattan and stayed over. The dinner menu was something Brazilian and included the Brazilian cocktail called a caipirinha. Think Brazilian version of a margarita or mojito. Nancy took a liking to the caipirinha, and with her usual wit, she dubbed it an Ipanema after the famous beach in Rio de Janeiro. There are so many words that come to mind in describing Nancy, but if I have to pick three, I'd say generous, courageous, and funny. What makes Nancy special is that I can't think of anyone else who combines her smarts, her beauty, her blend of talent for business and the arts, her tenacity, her humor, her welcoming heart for friends and strangers. Recently, I shared with Nancy a quote from the well-known wit Dorothy Parker. Parker once said, "I don't care what's written about me as long as it isn't true." Nancy loved the quote and said, "That's her."
My name is Dwayne Lefebvre, and the first time I met NDB was back in 1996 when I responded to one of her recruitment ads for the ad agency for Bell Atlantic Mobile. I was really psyched to be finished with my MBA and ready to pursue a career outside of fast food marketing. The interviews went quite well, and NDB was telling me as soon as I can get the three decision makers in the same room together, we will get you an offer. To her surprise, and mine, they came back and said I was overqualified, but there was this awesome position on the Taco Bell account. Next thing I know, I'm heading up a quarter of the Taco Bell account. It wasn't her favorite client, and it certainly wasn't my favorite job, but we never held that against each other, and it was the beginning of a great relationship. We stayed in touch over the years, and we used to talk occasionally after I moved to India in my trailing spouse role. Whenever we would chat, she would always say how jealous she was that I was in India because it was at the top of her bucket list, and every time I would tell her to stop being jealous and book a flight over to visit. She got to check that off her bucket list in 2007 with a 2-week whirlwind tour of India. Her excitement only grew after she booked the tickets and we started to put together the program. I think a few of our hotels are still on her best in my lifetime list. We stayed at some spectacular places like the Imperial in New Delhi, Arma Villas in Agra, and the Oberoi Grand in Calcutta. We packed a lot in, including the Pushkar Camel Fair, which is one of those things that everyone should see but not many people get to. It's a combination state fair, international tourist attraction, and an opportunity for the farmers of Rajasthan to buy and sell their horses and camels. Imagine 10,000 horses and camels being bought, sold, and traded. Well, NDB wasn't quite as impressed with the accommodations. She did like her luxury tent, complete with air conditioning in the desert and the toilet out back. It can be such a treat to tour a country with inexpensive labor and spectacular levels of friendly service. I remember her coming back from the breakfast buffet at one of our hotels, saying to me under her breath, "There's a big bowl of pomegranate seeds already out of the shell," as if it was a secret. It became one of her favorite treats at breakfast every day in our various hotels. If you ever want to see her smile, just say, "Purple shirt, don't trip." We were heading to the Pushkar Fair and running a little bit late. We were rushing to get on the right train at the most chaotic station. The porters were rushing ahead of us with our luggage hoisted on their heads. They knew that the train would leave without us. I was furiously trying to keep them in sight so we would get on the train and with our luggage. She wasn't fully recovered from a surgery and was concerned about tripping. We made it, but whenever I would wear that bright purple shirt, she would laugh and utter her guiding phrase, "Purple shirt, don't trip." If I had to describe NDB in 3 words, I think they would be friendly, genuine, and patient. I think those are the unique strengths that make her so special to all of us. You can just have an easy conversation with her at the drop of a hat. She's the real deal, and she's very patient. I don't think she could do the recruitment job that she has for decades without a big dose of patience.
So I've known Nancy for about 15 years. If I had to use some words to describe her, the first would be as a recruiter. That's how we first met. She was the recruiter who helped get me a job in Nashville, Tennessee. She made me redo my resume about 400 million times, and it was all for the better. I got the job. We kept in touch for all these years. Next word I would say would be a mentor. Whenever I would have work questions or updating a resume or having people to refer, I would reach out to Nancy. She'd reach out to me for people and would talk to each other kind of on and off. Always a pleasure talking to her. She's always a tough cookie, but just gave really good, honest advice. And most recently, I'd call Nancy a friend. Like I said, we've kept in touch over the years. We both share love for dogs and animals. And when we would catch up, we'd mostly talk about our dogs. My shelter dogs that I have, and I've seen so many pictures of her pets over the years. She's just a great person. What makes Nancy special to me is just how much she cares for people. Sometimes she comes across as tough, but she's always following up, trying to help folks out. She's just a shining light. She's one of those people that when you talk to her, she's going to brighten your day no matter what. That's why I love Nancy.
The first time I met Nancy was in the workout room at 1000 Grandview, and gradually started to meet some of her friends at 1000 Grandview, met her family, and we became friends. There's a restaurant in Station Square that Nancy really likes a lot. Kiku, Japanese restaurant, sushi, and a variety of other tantalizing options on the menu. My recollection of our times together at Kiku were that the first half hour we'd spend with Nancy saying hello to the owners, hello to the sushi chefs, hello to the waiters. She obviously liked the place a lot and knew everybody there. We would always start with edamame, and then she'd get water with no ice, and I'd get a Chardonnay. And then we'd order something off the menu and often share whatever we ordered. Two things about Nancy that probably everybody knows is one is she's a culinary activist. She studies food and what pairs together and what goes together and knows food well. The activist part is that she loves to cook for her friends and family, and she's really good at it. Nancy really likes Tyson, not Mike Tyson, and not the chicken. I'm talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson. She likes actually anything about the cosmos or about outer space or about space travel. We would frequently watch programs about outer space. The other thing that she loves is a good book. We've had many a good conversation about books that we like and authors that we like and shared ideas. She is very intellectually curious. The three words I would use to describe Nancy would be tough, kind, and adventurous. And by tough, I don't mean hard. What I mean by tough is just incredibly resilient. She's just able to handle whatever comes her way. She's one of the most resilient people I know. Nancy is a caring person. If I had a dime for every time she told me about who she was baking cookies for and do something for, I'd be a rich man. She's just one of the kindest people I know. Adventurous, well, Christ, she's been to India, jumped out of an airplane, and she's not done yet. She has more adventures in her, I suspect.
I was introduced to Nancy by Joel Mandel, a mutual friend and member of MRN, the recruiting network we all belong to. This was a long time ago, around 2005 or so. Nancy was thinking about joining our network. We bonded quickly over our mutual love of animals and specifically dogs. When we first met, Nancy was with Sly and I was with Worf. We both had the best office mates ever. We also had a similar outlook on recruiting and how best to treat candidates and clients. We work well together, and we have even made some money. MRN provided us with quite a few excuses to get together. We got to hang out in places like Naples, Marco Island, Las Vegas, Columbus, Estes Park, Nashville, Charleston, you get it, the office parties. We were often roomies as well. It is always good to get together with Nancy. She keeps the laughs coming. I actually made it to Pittsburgh to drive her and Miss Shirley to the meeting in Columbus not too long ago, and it was a great road trip. Shirley was the perfect lady, and Nancy wasn't too bad either. Nancy is super smart, loyal, and caring. She is so creative in everything she does. Her work, her cooking, her flowers, her art. I am the owner of a beautiful glass ball that I love. I think she just approaches life with a creative flair. She is optimistic and never gives up. She is a New Yorker after all. If you are a friend of Nancy, she will have your back. Always.
So my first meetings with Nancy were about 15 years ago when my son Ben was on the search for a college, a university to go to. So we went to Pittsburgh for the first time. I had a blast with Nancy. Possibility of Ben being in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon or Pitt would have been great. It didn't turn out that way. That boy went to West Point, but it was the next boy, Chris, and his life in Pittsburgh that solidified my relationship with Nancy. And Nancy became a pseudo mom for my boys, Christopher in particular. She was there for every recital and concert and event gig that Starship Mantis was performing in. She was there to feed my boy many times, and not only dinner that night, but a whole meal to take home to dorm room, apartment room. And she was always there to support him like another mother figure. And I couldn't be more grateful for that. Our relationship has been one of admiration toward each other, and I've really appreciated her in my life, and particularly in my boys' lives. After her first bout with cancer, not even recovered yet, went with us to watch Ben graduate from West Point. We love Nancy. We all love our time with Nancy and miss Nancy, but we know that she is always in our thoughts and a big part of our life.
I first met Nancy in 1987 when I rejoined Y&R, and I was assigned to the Army account. That account was structured differently than any other account at the agency at that time, in the sense that it was truly an account orientation. That is, no matter what division we were in, media, creative, account, executive, we all worked on the Army account together. Nancy came over when the account moved to Y&R, and she had been an account executive there, overseeing the Army Field Force, but she ended up in the media department, and so our paths crossed. Stories about Nancy, well, when you've known someone for almost 35 years, you do have a couple of stories. I will stick with one that always makes me laugh. It was many years ago, and I can't exactly remember when. It's when Nancy and Ken were living in the house before the pool, and Nancy and Ken had adopted a couple of stray cats, a black and white boy, and a very snooty female, who Nancy named Faxie, because she sat on the fax machine. And I was planning a trip to visit them up there in Pennsylvania. We're on the phone, and Nancy's just cracking up and laughing hysterically about that I'm going to see these incredibly funny animal sex acts. And I'm like, what is she talking about? But I said, okay, it's Nancy. I'll see. Anyway, I get up there and we're hanging out in the kitchen and talking up a storm. And the little black and white boy comes in and he flops on his back. Sly walks in and starts licking the kitty's balls. And the two of us just lost it. Till this day, I still think it's one of the funniest moments I ever experienced with Nancy. So words I'd use to describe Nancy, well, funny as all hell, resilient, incredibly brave, really tenacious. What made her special? Her sense of humor, obviously, but she was a deeply compassionate and empathetic person with a great, generous spirit, a big heart, and she was a wonderful cook, too.
I first met Nancy around 1976 or so, just after she had graduated from CMU, and she was applying for a position as art director at WPGH Television in Pittsburgh. I was the production manager at the time, and filling that position was my responsibility. Coincidentally, her husband, John, had also applied for the position, and they were about equally qualified. The major difference was that Nancy seemed to have more drive than John. She had a sharp tongue, a wise-ass remark, and besides, she was a lot better looking than her husband. Being the chauvinist pig that I am, I hired her, a decision I never regretted. Over the years, not only did she continually aggravate me, but she also challenged me to create new imagery that I never thought possible. A lot of it worked, and a lot of it didn't, but we continued to press on. Not only was Nancy very talented, she was also very tenacious. As an example, she continually bugged me about replacing the ceiling in her office she shared with two other artists, but I did not feel that it was necessary. One morning, I walked into her office to find the old ceiling on the floor, and she had ripped it down. She gave me that sheepish little smile and said something like, well, now I guess she'll have to replace it. She even insisted that she have a door for a work surface in her office. And that's what she got. The trouble with that surface was it didn't have that little edge to keep papers and pens and X-Acto knives from rolling off, the latter of which left the table and implanted itself into one of her toes, and she was wearing sandals. To this day, Nancy would probably tell you, I'd really rather have a door. That was only one of the many adventures we had together at Channel 53, including a trip to New York to create some promotional animation. After the first day's session, she was overserved at the hotel bar and was barely able to navigate her way from the Hilton in Manhattan back to her parents' home on Long Island, where she was staying. Needless to say, she was a little late to the studio the following morning. To this day, I don't believe she ever remembered what happened that night. I'm actually surprised she made it home. Today, I look back on that and I'm ashamed that the promotion manager and I didn't get her a room at the hotel and insist that she spend the night. Through those years, and until this day, we became great friends, even though she continued to taunt me with numerous requests, most of which ended up in some kind of disaster, like the time her pet gerbil got loose in her apartment, and she called me at home asking if I could help find and return it to its cage. After a lengthy search, we found the rodent behind the refrigerator, where I stuck my hand to retrieve it. I retrieved it all right, as it bit down on my finger and wouldn't let go for what seemed like an eternity. Fortunately, Nancy was by my side and convinced me not to crush it, but to return it to its cage, to live yet another day. I believe it was that same apartment when I stopped by one afternoon to drop something off at her home. I probably hadn't been there for more than 10 minutes before the smoke alarms went off, because she was trying to bake a tea towel in the oven, which was going up in flames. Fortunately, the sink was adjacent to the stove, where I managed to douse the flames with water. Yes, there was always an adventure when it came to Nancy, even when I came to visit her in the hospital after one of her surgeries, and she hid under the covers because she didn't want me to see her with the catheter. What she didn't know is that the catheter and its associated apparatus were hidden by the same covers until she revealed all by hiding her face from me. Nancy is surely a one-of-a-kind person, and she will be sorely missed by all of us who spent time with her over the years, and most lately during her sickness. We love you, Nancy.